Alexei Morov thought he had escaped death, but in Russia's most secret prison, death was never the worst fate, it was the mercy they were denied. In the icy heart of Siberia, where the sun barely rises and winter feels endless, strange things began to happen in 2000. Norlinsk, a small mining town surrounded by frozen wastelands, had always been a place of silence and survival. Its people were used to hardship, isolation, and the bitter cold, but when men began to disappear after being taken into police custody, even the locals, toughened by decades of harsh life, felt something shift in the air. At first, no one paid much attention. A few thieves, smugglers and political dissenters vanished after their trials, and officials claimed they were sent to correctional colonies farther north. But soon, families stopped receiving letters. Official paperwork was missing. Their loved ones' names no longer appeared on any prison lists. When wives and mothers went to the regional offices for answers, they were met with blank stares or quiet threats to stop asking questions. By the end of the year, more than 24 men were gone. Some were minor criminals, petty thieves or factory workers, who had argued with the wrong official. Others were activists who had posted online against the government. Yet none of them were ever seen again. People started whispering about a place that didn't officially exist, a facility so secret that even the guards didn't know where they were going when they escorted prisoners there. They called it Zone. Truck drivers who worked near the northern routes spoke of mysterious convoys moving at night. They described large military trucks with covered backs, flanked by unmarked black vans. These convoys left the Norlinsk detention center under heavy snow and disappeared into the wilderness, following no known road. Sometimes the trucks came back empty. Other times they never returned at all. Those who asked about them found their contracts suddenly canceled or their families relocated without explanation. A miner once claimed he saw one of these convoys stop near an abandoned nickel site, deep in the tundra. The next day, he quit his job and moved hundreds of miles away, telling his friends he would rather live poor than mine that far north again. His words were dismissed as drunken fear, yet months later, another witness described hearing metallic drilling sounds echoing from beneath the snow. The story began to spread across Norlinsk like wildfire. Local journalists tried to investigate but were quickly silenced. Their articles vanished from online archives overnight. A radio host who mentioned Zone 12 on air was fired the next morning. Even the town's police officers avoided the subject, muttering that some secrets belonged to the state. Yet, by the start of 2018, Norlinsk no longer felt like an ordinary Siberian town. The streets were filled with fear, and people began locking their doors even during the day. Mothers warned their sons never to talk to strangers in uniform. The rumor of Zone 12 had become something more than a myth. It was a warning. Somewhere beyond the frozen horizon, there was a place where prisoners didn't just vanish from records, they vanished from existence itself. The convoys always moved at night, when the sky was dark and the snowstorm hid everything from sight. No one in Norlinsk ever saw them clearly, but everyone knew when they passed through. The low rumble of heavy engines echoed through the icy streets, and the ground seemed to tremble beneath the tires. Those who looked out their windows saw nothing but the faint red glow of taillights disappearing into the blizzard. The locals called it the ghost route, a road that led north into nowhere. Each convoy carried prisoners, men taken from the town's small detention center, bound for destinations listed only as transfer points. Officially, they were being relocated to labor colonies. In reality, no one ever received confirmation of their arrival. The prison warden signed papers he wasn't allowed to read. The guards who escorted the trucks signed contracts that forbade them from speaking, even to their families. Those who asked questions were swiftly reassigned, or in some cases never seen again. The trucks followed a route that didn't exist on any map. It wound through forests of black pines and across frozen rivers before reaching the desolate tundra. Drivers spoke of blinding snow, sudden radio silence and strange interference that made their compasses spin wildly. Some swore they passed abandoned military outposts. Others claimed they saw light flickering under the snow, like something alive buried beneath the ice. When asked where the journey ended, the few surviving drivers could only describe an empty valley surrounded by jagged cliffs and rusted fencing. Rumor said the entrance to Zone 12 was hidden beneath the ruins of an old nickel mine shut down decades earlier. Locals remembered the mine well. Its shafts had collapsed after a mysterious explosion in the 90s. Since then, it had been marked as unsafe for entry. But now it appeared the government had reopened it for a different purpose. Satellite images from 2018 showed faint signs of construction activity in that region. Roads that once ended abruptly now stretched deeper into the wilderness. The images revealed heat signatures underground, suggesting that something was operating below the frozen surface. Activists tried to expose it. A small human rights group from Moscow sent 2 volunteers north to investigate the convoys. They never made it back. Their car was later found near a frozen river, doors open, belongings untouched. Their camera was missing, but their phones were recovered, wiped clean of data. When their families demanded answers, authorities claimed the pair had fallen through thin ice. The death certificates were signed and sealed within a day. By 2019, the legend of Zone 12 had spread far beyond Norlinsk. In criminal circles, it was known as the place you don't return from. Ex-prisoners spoke of being threatened with transfer there if they caused trouble in other colonies. Even guards whispered the name with unease. They said it wasn't a punishment facility. It was a testing ground. Some believed the prisoners weren't killed, but kept alive for reasons no one could explain. The fear became part of everyday life. Every knock at the door after dark, every black van parked near the police station, reminded the townspeople that anyone could be taken next. Zone 12 no longer felt like a rumor. It was a shadow over Norlinsk, a secret built on silence, guarded by fear and buried deep beneath the Siberian snow. Inside Zone 12, the concept of punishment went far beyond what anyone could imagine. The prisoners who arrived there were stripped of their names, identities, and memories of the outside world. The moment they were unloaded from the trucks, they ceased to exist as human beings. Each was assigned a number etched onto a small steel tag, locked around their neck. They were told nothing, not even where they were. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the distant hum of machinery and the constant howling of the Arctic wind above. The facility itself was built deep beneath the surface, in a network of reinforced tunnels carved into the frozen rock. The air was always damp, the walls slick with condensation. There were no windows, no natural light, only the cold glow of fluorescent bulbs that flickered endlessly. Guards wore gas masks and spoke through static-filled intercoms. Prisoners never saw their faces. Every corridor looked the same, leading to endless doors that opened and closed automatically, with metallic precision. No one knew how many levels there were, or how deep the complex went. What happened inside those walls was not punishment in the traditional sense, it was experimentation. Prisoners were forced into what the officials called resilience trials. They were locked in refrigerated rooms for hours with minimal clothing, exposed to freezing temperatures just above fatal levels. Others were deprived of sleep for days, bombarded with blinding lights and high-frequency sounds that made them hallucinate. Some were placed in isolation cells where the walls emitted low vibrations that caused headaches, nausea, and disorientation. Every reaction was recorded. Every breakdown was documented. The scientist overseeing these trials claimed they were studying human endurance under stress, but the prisoners quickly learned the real purpose was control. Those who resisted were subjected to even harsher experiments. The food rations were laced with unknown chemicals that altered perception and dulled emotions. After a few weeks, most inmates stopped asking questions. They became numb, obedient, and silent, living shells who existed only to survive the next trial. A small group of prisoners began to notice patterns. The ones who lasted longer in the cold or endured pain without collapsing were moved to a different section of the facility. No one ever saw them again. Some believed they were killed. Others whispered that they were being used for something worse, medical testing. There were stories of operating rooms hidden behind locked steel doors, where prisoners were taken in perfect health and returned broken, scarred, and unable to speak. The guards showed no emotion. They carried out orders without hesitation, as though they were being controlled themselves. Sometimes distant screams echoed through the corridors, but no one dared to react. Fear became a constant companion, heavier than the air they breathed. Each day felt endless, blending into a cycle of cold, hunger, and pain. Time lost all meaning. In Zone 12, death was not the worst fate. Survival was. Prisoners learned that the longer they lived, the more they would be tested. Their minds were stripped layer by layer until only obedience remained. The facility did not aim to destroy life. It aimed to erase humanity itself. Among the shadows of Zone 12, one figure stood above all others, a man known only as the Doctor. No one knew his real name or where he had come from, but everyone inside the facility understood that he was the true power within its walls. The guards followed his orders without question, and even the senior officers lowered their eyes when he entered a room. He moved with slow, deliberate steps, his voice calm and measured, as if everything that happened there was part of a carefully designed experiment. The prisoners never saw him without his white lab coat and gloves, which remained spotless no matter how grim the surroundings were. The Doctor was said to have once worked for a military research institute that specialized in psychological warfare and endurance testing. Officially, he had vanished after a scandal involving unauthorized human trials. Unofficially, he had been recruited for a project so secret that it existed outside the government's normal control. Zone 12 became his laboratory, a place where he could push the limits of human resistance without oversight or consequence. His focus was not on punishment but on manipulation. He believed that fear and pain could be measured like temperature, and that the human will could be reshaped through the right combination of suffering and hope. Under his supervision, every aspect of the prisoners' lives was controlled. He monitored their reactions to deprivation, their physical responses to freezing temperatures, and the breaking points of their minds. He treated them not as criminals, but as specimens, numbers in a vast experiment designed to redefine control itself. Those who survived the early stages of testing were subjected to new procedures that blurred the line between science and torture. In one section, prisoners were forced to perform repetitive tasks for hours while being monitored for signs of mental collapse. In another, they were injected with sustenance that caused vivid hallucinations, forcing them to face their worst fears over and over again. The Doctor rarely spoke, but his presence was felt everywhere. His personal quarters were located in the deepest part of the complex, beyond several locked gates guarded by men who never made eye contact. Rumors among the staff claimed he kept journals filled with data, photographs, and sketches of the human brain. Some said he had discovered a way to alter behavior permanently, to erase memories and rebuild a person's mind from scratch. Those who doubted his methods did not last long. A few guards who questioned the ethics of his work were quietly transferred, and one disappeared altogether. Despite the horrors he oversaw, the Doctor showed no signs of guilt. To him, the prisoners were tools, each one contributing to his understanding of how far a person could be pushed before the soul gave up. He saw himself as a pioneer, not a monster, a man devoted to unlocking the secrets of obedience and fear. And in the cold, silent depths of Zone 12, his experiments continued without interruption, hidden from the world above. Whatever morality once guided him had frozen long ago, buried beneath the same ice that entombed the prisoners who would never escape his grasp. In the winter of 2021, the impossible happened. Someone escaped from Zone 12. His name was Alexei Morov, a 34-year-old former soldier who had once served in a special operations unit. Convicted of treason under unclear circumstances, Alexei was sent to the Siberian north for what his file described as indefinite rehabilitation. No one expected him to be seen again, but on a night when the wind howled like a beast across the tundra, fate intervened. During a routine transfer between sections of the facility, one of the armored transport vehicles overturned on a patch of black ice. Amid the chaos, Alexei vanished into the blizzard. For 3 days he wandered through the frozen wasteland with no food and only fragments of clothing to shield him from the cold. The temperature had dropped below -40 degrees, and the wind cut through him like knives. His fingers turned blue, his lips cracked, and his vision blurred from exhaustion. Yet something inside him refused to die. He followed the faint glow of distant lights until, on the 4th night, he stumbled into a small mining village and collapsed near a storage shed. The villagers found him barely breathing and rushed him inside. When he woke, his skin was frostbitten, his hands swollen, and his eyes wide with terror. Before the authorities arrived, Alexei spoke to one of the locals, a retired teacher who lived near the edge of the settlement. In a trembling voice, he described a place, buried beneath the ice, where prisoners were used like test subjects. He spoke of underground chambers filled with humming machines, of men driven insane by endless noise and light, and of the doctor who observed it all with calm precision. He said the prisoners were not punished, they were studied. Some were injected with drugs that erased their memories, others forced into freezing tanks, to test how long the human body could endure before shutting down. "They make you wish for death," he muttered repeatedly, staring blankly at the wall. The teacher recorded his words on an old camcorder, and contacted a freelance journalist who had been investigating rumors of Sirtet prisons in the north. Within 24 hours, that journalist uploaded a short video clip of Alexei's testimony to an encrypted forum. The footage spread quickly through the dark corners of the internet, reaching activists, reporters, and intelligence circles. In the video, Alexei sat shivering under a blanket, his face pale and hollow. He spoke haltingly, his voice weak, describing the numbers carved into prisoners' neck tags, the endless tests and the rooms that reeked of chemicals. At one point he looked directly at the camera and whispered, "There is no end to the pain. There is only survival." 2 days later he was gone. The official report claimed that Alexei died from infection due to frostbite. But the villagers remembered a group of men arriving in unmarked vehicles the night before his death. They took the camcorder, sealed the house, and warned everyone to forget what they had seen. Yet the story could not be buried. The video had already escaped just like Alexei had, and for the first time, the world caught a glimpse of the nightmare hidden beneath the Siberian snow. When the video of Alexei Morov spread online, it caused a wave of quiet panic. For the first time, there was physical evidence, however blurry, of something that had long been dismissed as rumor. Journalists in Moscow began asking questions about Zone 12, though none dared use the name openly. Instead, they referred to it as a classified northern detention site. Within hours, official statements were released declaring the footage fraudulent. The Ministry of Internal Affairs claimed it had been created using AI-generated deepfake technology as part of a Western disinformation campaign. The message was clear: the state would not tolerate anyone questioning its prison system. However, denial only fueled curiosity. Independent researchers and human rights organizations started to dig deeper. They cross-referenced prisoner transport records and found inconsistencies, convoys that left Norlinsk but had no recorded arrivals at any known penal colonies. Names disappeared from databases and entire groups of inmates were marked as transferred to undisclosed facilities. When a reporter from a foreign newspaper published an article questioning these discrepancies, the piece was taken down within hours. The journalist's press credentials were revoked and he was deported from Russia the following week. Behind the scenes, a whistleblower emerged. He was a mid-level intelligence officer working for the Federal Security Service, identified only by the alias Mikhail. Through encrypted messages, he leaked internal memos referring to a rehabilitation Zone 12, described as a psychological correction project under the control of the Ministry of Internal Affairs. The documents detailed funding allocations, equipment shipments, and research objectives. One section mentioned behavioral restructuring through extreme environmental exposure. Another contained a list of non-recoverable test subjects dating from 2017. The documents reached investigative reporters in Europe and were published anonymously. The impact was explosive. International agencies demanded explanations. But Russia maintained total silence. Within 3 days of the leak, Mikhailov's identity was compromised. He was found dead in his apartment. The incident officially ruled a suicide. The timing, however, left no doubt that he had been silenced. Meanwhile, surveillance experts noticed unusual activity in northern Siberia. Satellite imagery showed vehicles moving around an isolated location consistent with the supposed coordinates of Zone 12. Then, suddenly, all visible activity stopped. Roads leading to the site were erased under heavy snow, and thermal readings dropped to zero, as if the entire facility had gone dark. It was as though the earth had swallowed it whole. Publicly, the Russian government insisted there was nothing to investigate. Yet inside the country, fear spread quietly. Families of missing prisoners received anonymous phone calls warning them to stop searching. Some who had been speaking out suddenly disappeared, their social media accounts wiped clean. Even seasoned reporters began to back away, realizing the danger that came with asking the wrong questions. The official stance remained firm. Zone 12 did not exist, but the evidence suggested otherwise. Too many rays had been erased, too many lives unaccounted for. The state's denial felt more like an attempt to bury something unspeakable, something that could not survive the light of truth. And for those who still dared to look, the message was clear. Some secrets in Russia are protected not by law, but by fear. Months after the government's denial, the world moved on. The story of Zone 12 faded from headlines, buried under new crises and political distractions. But in the remote Arctic expanse where it once stood, something unexpected occurred. Satellite images taken by an independent research group showed a massive crater forming in the area believed to contain the facility. The coordinates matched perfectly with the supposed location leaked in the intelligence documents. Analysts initially thought it was the result of permafrost collapse, a natural occurrence in the warming Siberian tundra. But when investigators studied the details, it became clear that the crater was not natural. It was the aftermath of a controlled explosion. When a small investigative team finally reached the site, they found what looked like the remains of a vast underground structure. The ground was cracked and blackened, with twisted steel beams jutting from the snow like the bones of a buried giant. There were no signs of life, no guards, no buildings left standing. Yet radiation detectors carried by the team began to spike as they approached the center of the crater. The readings were far too high to be from standard industrial materials. Someone had used radioactive compounds to destroy and sterilize the area. Amid the wreckage, the team uncovered fragments of what appeared to be laboratory glassware, sections of concrete walls, and the remnants of metal cages. The walls were scorched from intense heat, and several had strange markings etched into them. Rows of numbers, some partially melted, others still legible. These numbers matched prisoner identification tags from the leaked Zone 12 document. That single discovery confirmed what many had feared. The facility had existed, and it had been wiped off the map with ruthless precision. One of the researchers found a sealed steel door half buried beneath the snow. Its surface was warped from the blast, but a single word was still visible, carved deep into the metal: continue. No one could explain what it meant. Some believed it was a command, left behind by the doctor or whoever had overseen the project. Others thought it was a warning, a sign that whatever had begun in Zone 12 was not meant to end there. The team reported their findings, but before they could release the full data, communication with them was abruptly lost. Weeks later, their camp was found abandoned, their equipment destroyed by what was described as a sudden fire. International organizations demanded access to the site, but Russian authorities declared the area a restricted environmental hazard zone. No further exploration was allowed. Officially, the crater was explained as a collapse caused by methane gas trapped beneath the ice. Privately, experts knew that explanation was impossible. The ground had been burned too clean, too deliberately. Whatever truth remained was now buried under layers of snow and silence. But whispers persisted. Locals claimed to see unmarked helicopters hovering over the crater at night, and strange lights glowing faintly beneath the ice. Some said that, even in death, Zone 12 was still alive. its machines still running deep underground, waiting for the next command to continue. Even after the destruction of Zone 12, its shadow refused to fade. The Russian government erased every trace of it from official records. Maps of the Siberian north were updated, replacing the coordinates with a blank stretch of tundra. The name Norilsk was quietly removed from several regional reports, as if the town itself had never existed. Families of missing prisoners stopped receiving responses from authorities. Their letters were returned unopened, stamped with the same cold phrase, "Case closed." But silence did not bring peace. It brought fear, the kind that lingers long after the danger has passed. Across Russia's prisons, whispers of Zone 12 began to spread again. Inmates traded stories about the place where no one returned, warning each other that disobedience could earn them a one-way trip north. Some swore that new prisoners had begun disappearing under similar circumstances, taken in the middle of the night by masked officers who never revealed their destination. They called it the second zone, though no one could prove it existed. Guards refused to discuss it, and wardens changed the subject whenever the name was mentioned. The legend had returned, colder and more terrifying than before. In 2023, a series of anonymous letters reached human rights activists in Europe. Each envelope contained a small metal tag engraved with a number identical to those described in Alexei Morov's testimony. Alongside the tags were brief notes written in trembling handwriting, "Still here, we are below and he is not dead." Experts analyzed the handwriting and confirmed that the notes matched several missing prisoners' pre-arrest documents. If genuine, it meant the experiments or something like them had continued elsewhere. The message, "He is not dead," ignited new debate over the identity of the doctor. Some believed he had perished during the destruction of Zone 12, but others argued that he had been relocated along with his research. The Russian state denied everything, calling the letters fabrications. But foreign intelligence agencies intercepted encrypted communications that hinted at a new underground complex being built under the guise of a research installation in another remote region. Once again, access was restricted, and any attempt to investigate was blocked. It was as if the entire operation had simply moved, leaving only a graveyard behind in Siberia. Over time, the story of Zone 12 became something between myth and warning. A tale whispered among soldiers, prisoners, and even low-level officials. To speak of it openly was dangerous, yet everyone seemed to know it was real. Those who had seen the satellite crater with their own eyes described a lingering unease, claiming that at night the ground there still vibrated faintly, as though machines deep beneath the ice were still running. The truth was buried, but not dead. Zone 12 had been destroyed to the world above, yet its legacy lived on in the fear it created. Somewhere in the endless cold, new experiments might still be taking place, guided by the same unseen hands. Those who heard the stories understood one thing: the prisoners of Russia's hidden camps were not executed. They were erased. And for those who vanished into that silence, death would have been a mercy.